If you're watching this on the day it's uploaded, Merry Christmas. If you're not, then well, you missed it, so let's just move on. Today we're going to be taking a look at routes. Season 1 of Dragonflight really does not have that many complicated routes. In fact, it's probably easily the best season for routing ever. That combined with the tank situation really makes this an absolutely amazing season to get into tanking. But today we're going to be talking about what routes I believe are the best for all 8 dungeons while pugging. And honestly, a lot of them are just simply just go in a straight line. But there is a lot of nuance to understand here because there's going to be eventually some things that people are going to start talking about in different ways to approach certain parts of the dungeon. And the first dungeon we're going to take a look at right here is going to be a prime example of what could happen in the season and why you potentially as the tank need to recognize what the reality of the pug atmosphere actually is. So we'll start with Nokhud, and my route is not actually working currently in MDT. I can only imagine this is because the guy who makes it is heavily involved in the race to world first. So I guess he just hasn't updated it yet. I'm hoping that these routes simply will just work when he does update it. So just ignore that 89% part. But let's talk about exactly what's going on here because this is really the only one that actually needs an in-depth explanation, I feel like. We're going to start by going directly to the storm boss. If you ever did this on like heroic or normal and stuff, yeah, people would just go to the dragon boss first because it's like the closest boss and it seems like the right choice. But when pugging, there's only one thing that matters, and that's avoiding calamitous mistakes. And so the calamitous mistake in this dungeon is only ever going to come in this area, specifically to the Raging Tempest. Now, the reason I recommend this route is because it goes there first and gets that completely out of the way. So you just want to make sure that you can get that boss killed, and that is where we're going to lust. But there is actually a more efficient way to use Bloodlust in this dungeon, and that is what a lot of people are going to try to recommend to you if you are the tank and you start doing higher keys. A lot of people are trying to go to this segment first and then get a really big pull here and lust on that. And that sounds like a good idea on Fortified, to be honest. I'll probably do that at some point on stream because it's really not a bad idea at all. It's just simply, to me, if you are worried about not finishing this key, it's going to happen on this boss. So why do that second or even third? Just go right there, get it going. This timer is super lenient as well. So it might sound like we're wasting a lust, and we definitely are, but it just doesn't really matter. You're never going to actually fail this key to the timer. It's always going to be because of wipes. So yeah, basically go here. We're going to get a lot of extra count as well in certain areas, and this is going to be one place we get it. There's this little pack off the left after you get the 3rd totem killed here. Then we do this boss and then simply just go do the rest of the dungeon as you'd expect. Again, we're looking for one optional pack here, just these 3. They're kind of annoying, honestly. I really don't like pulling them, and they don't really give that much count. So right now I'm not absolutely in love with pulling these, but because then when we get to this area, it's like a lot more awkward to get any of these other packs, and we can't really get to the count we want. And so then at this point we have a lot of decisions to make because there's a small amount of count that's needed on top of what's actually here, and it has to be pulled at the right time. So you're obviously going to kill the main guys that start the boss RP, and then you're looking for a few other optional packs. These 2 are right next to this pack here. They're like kind of hiding behind a structure, so as a Blood Death Knight I can simply grip them up, but if you are not a Blood Death Knight, it's probably very difficult to get those mobs. So you might want to reconsider where you're fighting the count. Maybe you skip the previous pack and then just get something like this. Probably gives the same amount of count. And these guys pat, they're going to aggro one way or the other. In the beginning of the season, before they nerfed all this trash, this was actually really dangerous having them pat into you, but now I don't think it really matters that much. They really nerfed everything here, but just in some way, like shape or form, maybe you missed these, and that's probably what you're not seeing here, but you just need those. And then this is just a standard patrol onto the side. So after you do the 2nd mandatory pack, come down here and find these, and then after you do the 3rd mandatory pack, fly up over this pack and find this pack, which is also patrolling. If you are looking at the bloodlusting on this, the red is always going to be bloodlusting, and you're wondering how we have bloodlust on every boss, it's just because it's going to depend on what key level you're doing and what affixes you have right now. If you struggle with this trash at all, or it's like a much higher key so everything just takes longer, then you will have bloodlust on this boss, and I would recommend using it here. But if you don't have bloodlust on this boss, that means you did something very well, and you're probably so far ahead of the timer that it just doesn't matter. So then the decision point is, do we bloodlust here or do we save it? If you bloodlusted on the dragon, it wouldn't be up here, but if you didn't, then you would have a decision to make that I would say is only one that you should consider if you have more than 11 minutes left. Basically, you have the potential to still get another bloodlust if something goes wrong on the final boss. And the reason you definitely want to consider this is because this final boss is insanely dangerous at the end of the fight. I have now solo saved this boss many times. So even a bloodlust with like 4 people dead and you're the tank and you just pop drums or something like that, that might be the reason you finish this key. Another thing to keep note of is these guys cannot be skipped. They must aggro. If you fight the boss, they will come over as well. And honestly, a lot of people can probably get away with pulling them with the boss and be fine. I just don't think it's worth it because they have a lot of health and there's a really good chance that you're going to accidentally push the boss into phase 2 and these guys will still be alive and that will cause a lot of problems. So definitely do not lust in phase 2 here. A lot of people might like to do that. It might sound like a good play, but it's just not needed. The mobs have too little health and the only actual hard part would be not dying to them. So if you specifically are playing Blood Death Knight, you can handle all of these mobs alone. Just save Slappy Hands for it. Get the individual grips. You can grip to interrupt. You can stun. You could do all kinds of interrupting and disrupting here. You could pretty much handle these mobs on your own. And then you go into the final phase and realize, wow, we just popped everything on phase 2 and that is the hard phase. So yeah, that's why I said about like, don't be scared to use another lust on the way in here because you're not going to need lust on the start of this boss anyway. And there's one other thing on the route here that I need to talk about. This is like a really strange little skip that people are able to do now. You're actually able to fly all the way behind the boss and then just kind of like drop down into this area. It's just really unlikely that this stays this way. I can't imagine it. I just really doubt that Blizzard is going to let this stay this way because there's just nothing back here. You can do the same thing where we don't pull any trash in this area, and that is what I would recommend. It's not hard at all. I have a video on that on the channel, but this is definitely easier. If they leave it in, it's probably going to be the way you'll do this for the rest of the time, but it doesn't matter how you get here. It is slightly faster to do this for sure, but either way, directionally has no bearing on what you do for the rest of this boss. So just get here and don't pull anything, and that is that. Definitely the most complicated dungeon of the season in terms of routing, so if you get this one down, it'll make your life a lot easier, but you know, I'm telling you right now, I've already had a few people battle me on about where to lust. Luckily, I feel like, you know, this is Tyrannical Week when I'm recording this, so, you know, they're not going to win that argument. You got to play for killing bosses at all cases, but yeah, on Fortified Week, you might be able to think about switching it up. So let's go through the rest of them because honestly, a lot of these dungeons don't really need you to have this route at all, but we will talk about some of the danger parts. Ruby Life Pools is the first on the list, and it is a peculiar one because the route basically that is the easiest is simply going way over count and just go in a straight line the whole way. The way I'm pulling it is just getting these two guys small, but you could also just kind of go really, really big here. You can also skip some of this stuff. Like if you have a rogue, it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to try to skip some of this stuff. It's just like needlessly risky. This dungeon's difficulty does not come from anything on the bottom floor, so trying to get overcomplicated in the beginning here, it just doesn't feel worth it. It feels like another one of those things that like as long as you do not wipe to a boss, you upgrade this key, but of course, you know, we'll see once we get into higher keys as the season moves on. But yeah, I always lust on this boss. If you have a hunter, they can actually use Wailing Arrow to immediately cancel the shield for some reason. Otherwise, don't AoE the whelps, just kill the boss. And then we move on to the actual hard part, and the only real thing I can say here is just make sure you go left first. Everything times out better, and since the Thunderhead is the hardest mob up here, you'll know exactly where you stand immediately when you fight it. If somebody aggro's one of these, it's really bad because it's just a bunch of count that you absolutely cannot need, and they're really, really, really dangerous, but it's extremely unlikely anybody will. I have seen some people get like knocked back into them, but yeah, they're not in the route typically. And then the only other thing that you could see here is this guy causes some problems. A lot of people do try to skip him, or they try to convince tanks to skip him. And again, I'm of the opinion that unless you straight up wipe to this guy, just get him out of the way, because this boss, you know, like it actually forces you to move, and there's gonna be times when you move really far. Like I've finished him all the way over here at times. So if you skip this guy and you accidentally aggro him during the boss, man, that would be a pretty bad clip. Let's put it that way. So, and then up here, it's just a lot of really dangerous trash. There's not really anything to think about. Again, on MDT, like these things aren't right. I don't know what's going on here. This is not where the mobs even are, so just don't worry about this. Just pull everything in this area. This is a straight line dungeon, nothing to even be concerned with. And then when you get to this guy, just make sure you're attacking Kairaka, the dragon, getting the dragon to 50 and then pushing it below 50 before the mechanics of phase 2 starts is the way you make this fight easy. And if you can kill the dragon before multiple rounds of the mechanics happen in that phase, you'll be surprised at how easy this boss becomes, but that is easier said than done. There's a little thing that you might see on the channel every once in a while where if you time it really well, the dragon will really labor getting into phase 2 because it's in the middle of a mechanic and it has like a lot of animations to it and it has to move. So there's a very possible way that you can potentially game this, but I can't really give you a definite way to do that right now. But if you do all of this right, then the route just simply does not matter. Next, we'll look at Azure Vault, and this one where we're at right now in the season, the route does seem pretty crucial, but it's another pretty straightforward one where you probably just go in a straight line again and you'd be all right. The thing is, there's a couple key packs that I do want to skip. So I'll show you exactly what we're doing here. This first pull used to be incredibly dangerous. I did it the week that it was fortified, the hard week, and people got slaughtered by it. But honestly, I think it's still the right play here because they nerfed it first of all, but it's just like really efficient to start the dungeon with every CD up and use them all in the first pack. So when you're only fighting the 3, it's like just not great. So So just run by these, hit them with Blood Boil or something, and then run up in here. The next big question mark is these guys here, and I got a little note here because if you do not aggro all of these properly, they will aggro these whelps while you're fighting them, and that is probably the key. It sounds really strange to say that, but this trash absolutely sucks, and you can't skip it. Once it spawns, you're fighting it, and the bigger problem here is it's gonna probably just like tilt the group. It's just like an emotional check, like just like, wow, I can't believe we did that. So people are gonna get at each other's throats here, you know? But the other issue with doing that is then you have completely messed up the route. Just don't do this, please. Don't do this. It's such a big mistake, and if you get past that every time, you'll like never find any difficulty there. But like there's times when people just act like all the time they aggro it on lower keys. So, but the way I handle it is I just death grip both of these mobs and then kind of move these back a few paces and you're good. But anyway, then we're jumping down here. If you've somehow never seen that, you can actually avoid all this stuff. So we're jumping down, skipping that, grabbing everything here. We do not need these, but if they aggro during the boss, it's not a problem. It's just going to take you slightly over 100% count. We are lusting on this boss always. Then we move down and just do the standard skip here. There's no, you know, again, you would have to aggro one of these whelps and fail to stop them from spawning these mobs to fight any of this stuff. Pulling these two as it doesn't seem optional. And then we're coming down here. Now this is a very interesting part of the dungeon because a lot of this trash looks really dangerous, but it's actually not that dangerous. I really like combining these two packs, and these big arcane elementals, they do almost nothing. It's just like a rotational kick mob for the DPS, and then you have one priority as the tank here. You need to kick the icy roots or whatever it's called. This guy is going to try to root the party, and if he does that, all the other mechanics on the trash actually start mattering. Just save your interrupt for that guy, pull it together, easy mode. Then we come over here and we have a similar situation where there's a patrol that actually could be aggroed with one of these packs. The problem is this guy is the really dangerous mob that we had been skipping earlier in the dungeon, and got this giant circle that he's going to try to make you move out of. If you don't move out of it, you take damage and you get rooted. And the problem is he pats all the way up here, so it can be very difficult to avoid this. It's very like not even hard to do, but at times if you're not paying attention, you will aggro it accidentally. But I would heavily recommend not aggroing it, because when you're moving out of this, these types of mobs here, Crystal Fury, they're going to do this massive frontal that you as the tank need to make sure you're not hitting anyone else with, and that becomes really difficult when everybody's moving out of this mechanic. Like especially if you fight it on the edge here or something like that. Like if you had this right on the edge, then there's only one direction you could move, and then everybody's in line of the frontal. So you have to be very cautious of that if you do choose to pull this, and you definitely don't want to do that with this pack, because then you have 3 guys doing the frontals instead of just 2 guys. So yeah, I would definitely just get these alone. It's, you know, a little bit slower, but way safer in pugs. Then we move down to the bottom layer of that, and this is actually a much more interesting little thing that we can do here. So you don't actually have to aggro any of this stuff. If you wanted to, you could actually just run from one side to the other, and probably like invis pots would help you do that. But all you got to do is get here. The previous platform, you actually have to kill the mobs guarding like the locks of the floor, but down here you just have to get over here and that's it. So originally I was going to route like skip everything here because it kind of sucks, but honestly these mobs aren't that bad. I just made like a little plater script to make sure I never get knocked off by them. They do a frontal that's really frequent, and if they hit you with it, they knock you. But the question mark here is this patrol. This guy patrols all the way from one side to the other, and the ideal situation here would be to pull it with these mobs, but it's very unlikely that that's going to happen. Like you have to get really lucky. So just wherever it is, just try to grab it with one of the other packs. And again, this is not dangerous at all. These arcane elementals do nothing. It's just this guy. Make sure you're interrupting the route. Then we're going in here and we're trying to turn this room into 3 pulls, one way or the other. You can pull it in any order, but more than 3 pulls, you're just wasting a lot of time. So these 2 are the ones I usually start with. Again, we have another guy who needs to be interrupted. And then you have like this really like big guy, the lieutenant, and he like makes other mobs harder. So it's like, it doesn't really matter, but it is something to keep in mind. Pull that with either this side or this side, depending on where he is. And then whatever side's left, just grab this single guy and drag him over to one of these other sides. And that's the route. Kill this boss, always bloodlust here, and then move down. Now this area looks crazy on the route, I'm sure, but this is perfectly fine. These guys like are nothing. Like these frogs do absolutely nothing. It's definitely the easiest trash in the game right now. So yeah, you can absolutely pull every single one of these mobs. The only question mark would be like maybe like a bolstering week. The only thing to note with this route is that unless something has gone wrong, you need to skip 2 guys to stay under count. And I'm going to tell you right now, I have accidentally pulled these and we have lost the key to pulling them. Okay, it's a tight timer. It really is. And so I wouldn't be surprised if there's even a better route that comes out. But as of right now, all you got to do is just tank all this stuff on the edge or even outside. Like you can even drag it out if you prefer, but I think you can just tank it on the edge here. These guys don't really move. They just stand there. So just don't go into the middle of the room and you won't accidentally aggro them. But if you do, that is 3% count that you don't actually need. You can also try skipping them elsewhere too. Like you can actually skip this entire pack here. You just run right around it. So maybe skip those and grab these. I haven't tried it, but like, you know, there's a couple iterations you can make on it. But all I'm going to tell you now is just make sure you lust on the last last boss. Definitely the longest fight and the one that you need Bloodlust for the most. This timer is very tight, and I do think a good route here is going to be crucial. So next one we're going to take a look at is Algethar Academy. And again, it's a very, very straightforward route. You can't really skip much in here, but I will tell you why we're doing the route we're doing. And I think it works really well for us right now. This tree boss is the only hard boss in the dungeon. Honestly, if it got nerfed to a level of the other bosses, this would be probably one of the easiest dungeons in the game. And so you just want to come here as fast as possible. And by the way, I would heavily recommend taking versatility here, all 5 people, because if you're going to die, it's just going to be to kind of like damage from this boss. So yeah, getting a couple % damage reduction is just going to help no matter what key level you're doing. You could even change it too after the boss. We'll talk about that. But come here, you could even get this whole room in one pull now. They nerfed the hell out of these mobs, so these are the only actual hard mobs in here. Just make sure you're dodging the rest of the stuff, and I guess just keep threat. That's like the hard part about this whole area. So then come here with Bloodlust, and I'm gonna tell you right now, do not save Bloodlust. Use it on the pull. The amount of people who are trying to convince people to not lust on the pull or not use CDs on the pull, in a pug especially, just get the simplest order of all things. Lust on the pull, all CDs on the pull. What's that gonna do? It's gonna make the fight considerably shorter, meaning you're going to have less ads. Everybody's like, oh, we should use CDs on the ads. But what happens if you have 3 or 4 sets of ads? Then what are you gonna do? Play for the shortest fight possible. Certainly on a fortified week, this is going to be the best way. Then at this point, we're actually going to go this way. We're going to go do the bird boss, and then we're going to come back. So nothing to route here, but just keep that in mind, because a lot of people are just maybe not used to doing that, or they just don't realize that it's an option. So they're going to immediately go down this direction and come out here. And we're not doing this. This is definitely the worst trash in the dungeon. Yeah, we're going to just come all the way back through here. And at this point, you could then change your buff if you want for the rest of the dungeon. Now we come down here and we get probably the hardest pull of the dungeon. This is going to be really a dangerous pull. You do not need to do this. I wouldn't recommend it unless you're 100% sure you can survive it. There's a lot of magic damage and a couple things you need to interrupt. As a Blood Death Knight, I'm very capable of doing this, but it is very difficult. Then again, we have another double pull. All you're looking for is the Unruly Textbook. It's going to do a channeled stun. We need to interrupt that. And this is another very easy thing to wipe on. So just please only pull both of these if you're sure you need to, or you're sure that you can take care of them yourself. Like again, Blood Death Knight can easily interrupt both of those mobs without any concern. Fight the boss. You can Bloodlust on the boss. Doesn't even matter. And then we come up here and get probably the easiest trash in. This is probably the easiest segment in any dungeon, honestly. These big guys, they only do one thing you need to know, and they're going to Blade Storm when they get low. Just make sure you're stopping them from doing it, because they're probably going to kill your melee. But otherwise, it's all about being efficient here, because there's a lot of count up in this area. And so you could pretty much always double pull. This is what I aim to do. So these two into these two. Then here's the real question mark, is the patrol. Wherever the patrol is, you should go first. So this is the ideal case where the patrol would be right here, and you can pull them with these. This is a much harder pull to get going because there's 2 casters on each side. So you probably need to be a Blood Death Knight to be able to pull this off. Yeah, you should have no problem multi-pulling here and then going to the last boss with Lust. Next up, we're going to take a look at Halls of Valor, and this route is kind of like, there's a lot of trash in this dungeon. I'm just going to tell you the shortened version of it is we're going to go to Herja first. All right, so just, pull basically in a straight line. The only thing you need to know here is that this guy pats, so just get either of the 2 packs. It doesn't really matter, but this pack is slightly harder because it has the Mystic, and I would recommend trying to drag it up into these guys, especially on a Tyrannical week. This guy is like something people aren't aggroing, but I just really don't feel comfortable not aggroing him in a pug. It's just really not worth it, I feel like. So you're grabbing him, people are probably not going to love that, and then at this point you can be as aggressive as you want here. Like, we're going to get this whole hallway, so you can try to do it all at once. Done it a lot of times, it's not really that difficult. And then you got to do this all together as well. It's just like really not going to work to not do all this. But I will tell you, the shield maidens, they do a lot of damage. They put an armor debuff on you, and they also make you not be able to heal. But this is actually something you can backpedal out of. A lot of these mechanics that these mobs do, you can actually just backpedal out of. And so when you pull all these, you're going to need to do that. You're basically like stutter step kiting them. Every time they cast these abilities, you can just back away from them. Always Bloodlust for Herja. This is the hardest fight. And then just come back to the middle. So we got this guy killed already. And then, yeah, just the side packs. We need this one guy to get extra count. Not even really that needed though. But I am doing something that I think, again, probably people won't love, but I really like it. I think this is a really good way to handle this area. Now that we know the dragon is like, I haven't seen a way you can skip him. We might as well turn this into a little bit more efficient pack and take some of the pug danger out, because it's really likely that somebody aggroes one of these mobs when you're trying to skip all this stuff. So I think it's a really good idea to try to pull it and just make it part of the dungeon's route. And there's one thing I will note. This mob is actually needed for count. As you see, you need at least one of these stags. And I'm not really understanding how this works, because this guy, the Drake, seems to eat them. I don't really know if you get count for them, if he eats them. I'm not really sure. I've had this happen where we don't actually have 100% at the end here. But these 2 guys look dangerous, and they're kind of annoying. They do this like big AoE thing that if you get hit by, you get stunned. But They also do piercing horns, and again, that is simply something you can backpedal out of. So you should not take any damage from these mobs as a tank. They are not dangerous at all. If you die to them, you simply played poorly. Then you're gonna just like come down however you want to get past this pack. You can go right or around it. Kill here, gum down here, and this part is a little bit difficult. Like these guys are really dangerous still. The warg really dangerous. So you could even just split these up into 2 pulls if you want. We're simply pulling these 2 because I want to have some freedom for the boss to not accidentally aggro them. But a lot of people just skip all this stuff and then they just fight the boss near the cave, and then you can run into the cave, and then you could just run. If you're Death Knight, you can Path of Frost to save a few seconds and run across here. And then one other tip I want to give, one really cool little strat here: grab these 2 and then use the big speed buff on the ramp to your advantage. You grab them, get full threat on them, and just fly past them up the ramp. You're taking them up here, and it's really important to note that you need to pull this guy specifically, Haldor, the guy in the middle, okay? Do not pull this guy because he has an interrupt that you need to interrupt, and the guys that you pulled up the ramp will not allow you to interrupt him. This guy needs to be the one. Don't accidentally aggro any of the other ones, okay? And then yeah, you could fight all 3 of these guys together. It's kind of dangerous, but I do think this is better than the whole like beer thing. If anything, you might want to try to do that and then fight the 3 of them. I don't know if that's possible, but I do think, you know, fighting those middle guys, that's just you just got to get that up here because it's really inefficient to fight those guys on their own. And you could even like have damage done to them on the way up, which is kind of cool. Like by the time they get up here, they'll be at like 90% health just from dots and stuff. So, and that's it. Lust on Odin, or if you have it for some reason on Scovold, you can try it, but really straightforward dungeon. This route is super straightforward, but it is a little controversial, so we'll see how the season plays out for it over time. Next up, we have Core to Stars, and this is another one where I'm going to tell you right now, you do not need to watch this video to know how to do Core to Stars. There's really only one question mark in the dungeon, and it's just how you're going to get count. It doesn't really matter at all. People are going to maybe even try to suggest like doing these really weird things where you're like going down into the docks or something like that and getting mobs. You can do it however you want. This dungeon is extremely easy. It's easily one of the easiest routes I've ever seen, and it just doesn't matter. The only thing you need to know is that the last guy gives 6% count. You know, the reason I'm saying this is because there's like a lot of variables here, right? Like you're not going to pull all of this. It's just not going to be needed, and it's going to depend on what, you know, spawns where and when. So it doesn't like you don't need to see a route for this. I have the route. If you want to see it on paper, you want to export it, you can. But if anybody ever asks you for a route, they're just basically asking you, do you want to do all this extra trash in the beginning and then you can actually like skip a big part of the dungeon and then just come back this way or something like that? I'm not going to ever do that in a pug, so you don't need to worry about it. And I do have like Lust here, but I think like most groups are going to prefer Lust on this guy. This guy is really easy for me to solo, so I don't ever find him dangerous, but I think like your average group is definitely not going to agree with that. So just something to keep in mind. Doesn't really matter where you Lust. And then we come to the easiest dungeon probably ever in the game, Shadowmoon Burial Grounds. Again, one of the easiest routes ever in the game as well. And this is really shocking to me because in the WoD version, if you've never seen it, you really should take a minute and go look at it. And you will see absolutely absurd things happening. Like the game doesn't work in this dungeon. You can get out of bounds. You can skip things that should never be skippable. You can start at the first boss. Like it's just so broken. So I was like, all right, well, this is definitely going to be how this dungeon goes. And honestly, I don't know if Blizzard did this on purpose or not, but I think they might have just made it so easy that there's like, we don't want people trying that. It's like, honestly, I don't know if they could fix it. I don't know what the actual issue was, but yeah, there used to be a lot of really bizarre ways that you can skip, but you don't even need to do that anymore. There's only one thing you need to see on this route, and that is skip this guy, because if you don't, you just go over count. There's nothing else to it, you know? He pats, and the tip I will give is that as long as you pull this pack and fight it like cleanly and nothing slows you down, you will always get here as he's standing right here and then he's patting back this way. So just wait for him to go this side and then go left. And this seems to always work out where the mobs are not empowered on this side. Every once in a while, they will empower one of these mobs and it will turn into this mob, and that's really bad. And it doesn't even really matter. You can fight it. It doesn't, like, this dungeon is like a double upgrade key every single time you do it. So it's just irrelevant, but it's just something, if you want to be perfect, you don't do that. And then when you're fighting these trash, like, definitely grab these spiders. They're really annoying to drag over here, so just have one of your DPS do it. But if they don't, then you're gonna have to go get it yourself. I just like launch D&D off at them and then run back, because these guys like blink away and they're not really easy to drag. But same thing, these spiders do absolutely nothing, and they just give a bunch of free count, so we're just dragging them into the next pack. Down here though is where you're really going to be tested, because I think it's even a little bug, but I've seen basically there's these things that if you walk over them, they spawn an ad, and that ad is actually quite dangerous. Now in WoD it was just like a single skeleton, but now it actually casts an ability that will pretty much like one-shot anybody if it finishes the cast. What I'm seeing though is really strange. Every once in a while when I pull these, it will spawn 2 sets. So you'll actually have 6 of these mobs instead of 4, alongside these 2 casters as well, who are also going to require interrupts. That's like horrible. If that happens, you're in serious danger. So you either need to have extremely good interrupting and coordination to stop all these casts, or you need like a priest or a shaman or somebody who can quickly get all the shields off so those mobs just die because they have a shield and it prevents you from killing them quickly. But if you can get that off, they die super quick. So if you're in any way concerned with that, just pull one at a time. It's such an easy dungeon. Who even cares, you know? And then you pull this boss. One thing I will say that you can't put on the sheet in MDT, there's an ad here that will always aggro because one of these guys like does the exhumer. He like spawns any near him. It's the same as this mob. So you just need to grab this guy. You could even grab him during the fight and then it won't aggro during the trash. It's so easy. This boss is like probably the easiest boss ever in the game. And then this mob it pats from like down here all the way to back here. So you don't even need to pull this. Sometimes if you get lucky, it'll just be over here and you can just run right by it. And then that's it. It's literally straight line the rest of the way. These packs, you need some interrupts. Got to get the bats here. They do fly around. Definitely don't wait to get the bats. If you wait until you get the bats here, there's a very good likelihood that you'll actually just kill the carrion worm and you'll still be fighting the bats. So that's just slower than fighting them with the first pack and then dragging them into the next one. And these guys are dangerous as hell. Just try to kill one as fast as possible and that's it. So, and that is it. Temple of Jade Serpent is on here as well, but this is again another dungeon that you simply have no actual route wiggle room. You can choose to pull this area however you like. It really doesn't matter whatsoever. It's dangerous. You can pull slow. You can do whatever you want in this area. Straight line. There's nothing you can do. These are the only mobs that you would even skip, and I wouldn't even call them being skipped because they're not even like you'd have to run so far out of your way to even fight them. You could also, if it's like an easy trash week, you can also like grip this caster in and then fight both of these packs together. I've been doing that. And this boss, you know, doesn't really need lust. I think it'd be better to lust on this boss, but this boss can be very dangerous for the healer. So if it's a hard healing week and you don't have a second dispel, really hard fight. So it can help, but realistically, it's not going to help. Like it's just going to make the fight shorter so they don't go out of mana. That would be the only concern. The tip I give here is simply bring a warlock, and you got to tell this guy that he needs to have the magic dispel pet. I think that's the imp. He needs to have that out, which is not going to be a pleasant discussion for people who don't know about it, because as demonology, they really don't want that pet out. But just tell him like straight up, you're either invited and you do that, or you're not invited. And it just makes this so easy, because then he can dispel every single second mechanic, and this is the only hard part of the entire boss. Like you need to dispel it or the healer needs to go crazy and heal it. They even nerfed it already and it's still that hard. So that's it. This dungeon's probably the easiest dungeon in terms of thinking about it as a tank. So that's it, guys. Let me know what you think, man. I hope that this helps. I think this is definitely the easiest season to ever tank. So if you're on the fence, get right into it, dude. It's actually wild how much easier it is compared to season 1 of Shadowlands. Let me know if you have any questions. All the links are going to be down below. bigplay.1/routes. Hopefully once the add-on is updated, like nothing is going to actually change about these and they'll just work, but I promise you that these all work right now. And if there's something I missed, just let me know. Yeah, you just open these up here and then it's going to have like entire thing. You press this little button here, copies it to your clipboard, and then you go into your add-on import and you copy paste that in here, press import, and it's going to be there. So that's how it works. So thank you for watching, guys. If you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, we'll see you guys in the next one.